morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this critical session focusing on these three areas of ongoing conflict, namely Sudan, Afghanistan, and Burma. And these nations are currently experiencing mass atrocities and on daily basis. And so our session today aimed to highlight the voices of women leaders who are at the forefront supporting impacted community in these regions. And this morning, Dr. Irvin Erickson will provide some background context to the event. And I'd like to introduce him first. Dr. Irvin Erickson is a scholar for genocide and mass atrocities prevention at the Carter School, and he is the author of numerous publications on genocide, human security, and international criminal law. And also, he served as a senior fellow with the Alliance for Peacebuilding, and also holds editorial positions in prominent academic journals. Over to you, Dr. Irvin Erickson.
Thank you, Myra. And I'm going to return the compliments back to you and to say how absolutely delighted I am that you joined the Carter School community. You're technically a student, but you're just playing a magnificent role in intellectual leadership here. And it's a joy to watch these two Peace Week panels shape up. So I want to say that besides some prepared remarks, one of the reasons why I like panels like this, and I love planning it, and I love the vision that you put into it, is because conversations like this at universities tend to focus on human rights. What they often do is they blame the human rights violations on local actors, and then they present international actors as the ones responsible for the protection of human rights. And I think that actually you should probably flip both of them to get a better understanding of the human rights picture. I think we should very much look at the kinds of atrocities in these three countries that we're facing as very much shaped by great powers, often great powers that stick by allies regardless of the evidence of the human rights violations that are being committed. And at the same time, you can say, well, who's actually responsible for trying their best and finding ways of de-escalating violence, protecting rights, and building the kinds of resistance to systems of power that generate human rights abuses, the kind of people who rebuild communities, think about solidarity. These are people in these societies themselves. So I like this because it takes human rights and it takes it away from the lawyers as something that happens in courtrooms. That big institutions sort of bring into existence. And it really demonstrates that any kind of human rights victories that you have in the courtroom begin many years before with civil society activism, advocacy, solidarity, and people who understand the context of what rights are and mean and should be. And I think that from this, without getting into the weeds of what's happening in Sudan, Afghanistan, and Burma, I do think that what we've got here is in this panel which I'm looking forward to listening to, is an emphasis clearly on women's pivotal roles as in peacemaking efforts. But then also this is going to, for me, underscore the universal nature of the fight for basic rights, the critical importance, yes, of women's participation in conflict resolution and societal reconstruction. Sorry, those words did not come out my tongue very easily. But the way in which this sets the stage for deeper exploration of what rights mean and the strategies that we can pursue in civil society, in society in general, for organizing around rights in the name of peace, justice, and equality. So it kind of flips the script a little bit on peace building, and places, in my mind, panels like this place rights at the center of organizing for peace. So with that, I will turn it over. I'm sorry that the words came out all jumbled, and this is recorded for posterity. Remember me slipping up and so forth. But that should not take away from the panel that I'm really looking forward to listening to, and so happy that we have so many participants to join us.
Thank you, Professor. Okay, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists. although I haven't seen Nimet yet, but I hope she's coming in very soon. So Nimet Ahmadi, she is a native of North Darfur, and she's the founder and president of the Darfur Women Action Group and a veteran human rights advocate with extensive experience in promoting peace, security, and women empowerment in Sudan, and also internationally. Forced to leave her country due to her vocal stance against human rights abuses and genocide in Darfur, Nimet has testified before the UN Security Council and various international bodies, advocate for victims' justice, and worked tirelessly to mobilize the Sudanese diaspora in contributing to lasting peace in Darfur and Sudan. And we also have Nahid Farid. She is a former Afghan lawmaker and a civil society advocate. And she has an impressive background in data-oriented legislation and the policymaking. And also she served as the youngest ever elected politician in the Afghanistan and a chairperson of the House Standing Committee for Women Affairs. And since the Taliban took over in August 2021, she has leveraged her expertise to advocate for human rights in Afghanistan on various international platforms such as at the UN, UK Parliament, EU Parliament, as well as the US Congress. And also Makiso, she has 20 years experience working for intergovernmental organizations and also international development agencies across 7 countries. And she has proven expertise in spearheading multi-sectorial programs and complex projects for both public and private sectors. As a peace building and a gender equality practitioner, and a specialist in monitoring, evaluation, and learning. She also possesses a diverse skill set, including government relations, research, evidence-based policy advocacy, and also program management. Last but not least, Ambassador Kelley Currie. She has served in several high-profile roles, including U.S. Ambassador at Large at the Global Women Issues, U.S. Representative at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and also senior positions at the Department of the State and the Congress. And throughout her distinguished career in foreign policy, she also has specialized in human rights, political reform, and also humanitarian issues with a focus on Asian Pacific region. And she also held leadership position in various international and non-governmental organizations. And honestly, gracefully, she is our dear sisters in this movement for as long as I know. So over to you, Ambassador Currie. Thank you so much for taking time.
That last piece is the highest compliment that anyone can pay me, is to call me your sister in this struggle. And it's my honor and privilege to have worked with all of these women on this wonderful panel that Myra has put together today over the years. In some ways, I wish I never knew any of them, because I wish I never had to, because if the only reason I really know these 3 women is because of the horrific things that have happened in their countries. But the reason I know these 3 women is because they have, and 4 women, including Myra, actually, is because despite, they have come through what has happened in their countries as leaders and been shaped by the fire of these experiences and become these incredible women who I am privileged to know, to call friends and sisters. And so it's a real honor for me to just have the chance to moderate today and talk with these incredible leaders who I'm honored to call friends. So let's just get right to it. When I think about how you all have been shaped by your experiences, the experiences of conflict and mass atrocities in your countries, it's really extraordinary the kind of energy that you bring and creativity that you bring to the table in trying to address these solutions, as well as the drive that you bring. So I wanted to talk. We've got the Women, Peace, and Security agenda on the one hand that you've all been very much involved with, and that shapes the framework for a lot of the international cooperation that we have across communities that are affected by conflict, and who are trying to rebuild societies post-conflict. And then we have the interlinked issues of women's economic empowerment and thinking about the dynamics of how women's economic exclusion and exclusion from positions of political power both shapes and leads to conflict, and really is key to solving these problems. So if we could just kind of go around the group, and if you guys could just talk a little bit about how how the experience of being women leaders in a conflict affected country has shaped your outlook on these issues, and what it is that this experience has meant for you as a leader. Sorry, why don't we start with Naheed, since I see her right below me on the grid.
Sure, Ms. Ambassador. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be at the same room with such a distinguished number of panelists and individuals who care about human rights and women's rights and the situation in so many countries around the world. I'm also very humbled by the introduction, and thank you so much for having me. As I stand before you, I am reminded of women of Afghanistan that are trapped in the cycle of conflict, not just this conflict, it's more than 4 decades of conflict that Afghan people and Afghan women are encountering. The moment I fled my homeland, Ms. Ambassador, it was the time that I decided to leave everything behind instead of just staying in fear. And I can still feel that fear, much like my mother, who did the same decades ago when she fled the Soviet occupation in Afghanistan. And it's a fear that generations of Afghan women have lived with under the conflict, and the conflict that stripped away their dignity, their rights, their ability to dream, their ability to thrive, their ability to be themselves, their identity, their self, their being in a society. They are now relegated to the subordinate level of the society. But even as we escape, I believe we flee conflict, but we didn't flee our hope. We carry that with us, and the belief that one day Afghan women will rise again, they will reclaim their hijacked freedom, and they highlight their leadership role that they once had in Afghanistan. If you remember, in the last 2 decades, Afghan women showed such a high level of ability to do anything, from pilot to doctor to politician to judges. They showed to the world there is no limit in their ability. But now the Taliban are stripping their life and their rights. And I want to also highlight the fact, and then I will stop. I believe other sisters also have things to highlight, but after the fall of Afghanistan and the Taliban, we all know the context. It's in so many headlines that they almost stripped women from any right, even right of having their voices. Their voices are also banned. Imagine. So they are not able to get out without a male chaperone. They are not able to study. They are not able to work. And the Taliban are boosting their narrative, saying that they brought peace to Afghanistan. There is a security, there is no conflict in Afghanistan. The reality is that half of the population, women, girls, are living in a constant state of fear and conflict. Afghan women are systematically erased from public life. The regime's more than 150 decrees, and also with the new decree of PVPV law that the Taliban issued few weeks ago, they target women's education, women's work, their mobility, then turned Afghan women into prisoners in their own home. And now with the support of countries like Canada, like Germany, like Australia, like Netherlands, this is the first time that they are going to be held accountable in the International Court of Justice. This is the first time the world started to put advocacy in action, not just words, not just statements, but something that will tell the Taliban that there is no way to stand with this kind of situation that they are preparing, and they are oppressing on women of Afghanistan. So I also want to wrap up this section with the fact that the Taliban see their future in a radicalized country, in a country that is living with extremism and fundamentalism, and women are a barrier in this kind of pathway to radicalize the country. Women are the symbols of development, and do not let their boys to be radicalized if they are educated, if they are independent and can manage their family. And this is how the Taliban are targeting women, like all 150 decrees that I talked about are about women, not about other issues. Other issues are there, but not that the women is the issue that is centered. And I don't want to talk about myself. I'm representing a nation of talent, a civilized nation, a nation that has thrived and show to the world that they're capable of managing their own country, but a nation that is trapped and need the world to be with them at this greatest time of their need.
Thank you, Nahid. Makeso, please, I'd like to hear from you about how living in a conflict-affected country has shaped your activism, and how you think about leadership and women's roles in peace building as well.
Thank you, Currie, and thank you, Mira, and organizing committee for having me here. Especially, I would like to extend my thanks for giving Burma a space in this panel today, because as we all know, Burma's plight has largely disappeared from global news headlines. So by way of background, Burma is currently fighting several battles. We are fighting a battle against poverty, inflation, against gender, ethnic discrimination, ethnic cleansing, especially for the Rohingya populations, against the failing educational, healthcare, security, infrastructure. Ultimately, the battle is between the long-standing authoritarian junta rule against the cries for democracy and the yearn for democracy. So the people of Burma are indomitable. And among the people of Burma, we have the women's leader, newly emerging young women's leaders are completely indomitable, and they have thrived to the occasions with all the creativities and their innovative strategies. As we all know, patriarchy and militarism go hands in hands, and patriarchy is resilience and pervasive, even more pronounced in times of war. And given the unequal gender power relations and coupled with the heightened militarism and nationwide armed conflict, it has created a breeding ground for abuse of power, the rising rates of gender-based violence, and widespread insecurity. So the women peace and security agenda in Myanmar has become women, lack of peace, and insecurity as we speak. But despite these challenges, women are not bystander. They are not a passive victim. They are at the forefront, working as the first responder. Right after the coup, there were initial concerns suggest about the feminist movement might become dormant, and together with this diminishing of civic space and the authoritarian regime. Contrary to our fear, the feminist movement in Myanmar remained extremely vibrant, dynamic, and the new intergenerational women's organizations are emerging. I'm so proud to be part of this women's advocacy coalitions as well. Our coalitions really established less than 48 hours following the coup. And less than 1 week, we were already in touch with Ambassador Currie, and we were trying to figure out our strategies and tactic ahead to face off with this authoritarian regime that was unfolding during that time. So we also appreciate the transnational feminist movement and support we gather from transnational women's movement that we receive, for example, from Ambassador Currie and other feminist organizations, as well as WPS institutions worldwide who really stood up with us to provide us support, including the relocations of high-risk activists and providing them suggestions and strategies to be relocated as they are receiving arrest warrant, and their families' property has been seized by the military junta. So currently today, I'm very proud to share with participants here that despite being scattered across the region, all over the world, the Burmese activists and peace builders and peace makers from Myanmar work across different time zones around the clock, demonstrating an impressive ability to coordinate, cooperate, communicate, and respond to the on-the-ground situations and diverse need of our community in a timely and effective manners. What makes these spring revolutions different from the previous 1990s people's struggle for democracy is that we have this technology. Technology has enabled our digital activism to get ahead, to really mobilize and get the on-the-ground situations up to date daily on a daily basis and response quickly. But these are not without challenges. It is very challenging as the junta really squeeze out every possible money transfer channels and arresting people who are providing this informal money channel through Hondi system and so on and so forth. We really have to get around different channels through the neighboring country to provide this cross-border humanitarian aid to conflict-affected communities. And in terms of policy framework, the junta has been utilizing these 4CAT strategies. It is depriving people of food, intelligence, money, and human resources. And this is their age-old strategies to really cut off everything from the conflict-affected victims, conflict-affected community, as well as the resistant fighters. So while everyone is affected, women, girls, and gender minorities bear the brunt of these insecurity. Another thing that I would like to point out before wrapping up is since February this year, the military junta enacted forced conscription law. This law is forcing young men under the age of 35 to serve in the military mandatorily. So a lot of young men fled the country to avoid recruitment and leaving a vacuum in the community where women and girls have stepped in to fill this vacuum, and they are bearing the burdens, triple burden, managing production, reproduction, and community security. So these are our sisters on the grounds are providing this level of incredible support to conflict-affected communities. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Makeso. And I'm so thrilled that Nimat has been able to join us, and welcome, Nimat. Our sisters were just discussing the issue of how coming up through a conflict-affected context shaped their activism as women leaders and made them the kind of women leaders that they were today. And both Nahid and Keso have given also a little bit of an overview of the situation. And I think that, when Makeso mentions that Burma is a forgotten conflict, I would say that all three of these contexts have really been pushed off the headlines and are quite forgotten. And the only time they appear in the headlines is when something insanely egregious happens, as today we are hearing that in Khartoum, the Sudan Armed Forces are preparing a new offensive against the RSF, and the same with Afghanistan, where the Taliban's latest lunatic decrees taking away women's voices in public then you get like a brief mention, but then it goes away like a rock dropped in the water. And so you guys are the ripples. Tell us what, and so I want to talk to you about how that has shaped your leadership as a woman leader in a conflict affected society. Nimat, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I am very, very pleased to be with you here today. Thanks to Myra for organizing this and the co-host. And I'm very pleased to see you, Dr. Kelley, and all the women leaders in this call. Unfortunately, speaking to you at a time when Sudan is going through its worst crisis and maybe the worst in history. Today, as you all know, since April 15th of last year, Sudan have been engulfed in a vicious cycle of violence. And it is just a power struggle between two generals, but they have put the entire country in an undescribable conditions where the war started in the capital, Khartoum, quickly spread to across the country. And given the fact that Darfur was already in crisis that started 20 years ago, many people have been out of their homes in the internally displaced camp, and that now has exacerbated their situation to the level that you cannot find words to describe. Today, the UN declared that 26 million people, more than half of the population of the country, are facing acute hunger. Famine has already been declared in the Darfur camp. UNICEF recently published report said a child dies every 2 hours in the Darfur camps. This was 5 months ago. So now you can imagine 10 million people have been forced to flee, becoming displaced. 2 million across the country, across the border to the neighboring countries, living in deplorable conditions. Among all these numbers, who is the one that bearing the brunt? Are women. Women are the one. At the same time, when the international community has left the Sudan because of the insecurity and the eruption of war, women are the one who pick up the challenge of going out, helping their people survive. The situation felt gloomy, scary. that this will be the end of Sudan, because Sudan has never been this isolated since its independence in 1956. All the international organizations, international diplomatic missions, any international presence has left Sudan, left the people of Sudan to fend for themselves. But this woman has fearlessly draw the line between, a bold line between despair and hope, and continue to document atrocities to keeping people informed, identifying safe route for people fleeing, providing health assistance, even providing burial service for those people who've been killed and scattered in the street of Khartoum and Darfur. And at the same time, they have to advocate and help their families and their neighbors' families survive. So you can imagine how much women have to take. Unfortunately, of all this effort has been recognized, and for the first time in history, to see that volunteers, women leaders, civil society becoming a frontline humanitarian actors, and they have yet to be protected. Unfortunately, Sudan has gotten very limited media coverage, very limited politician talking about it. And now that the situation reached into a status that beyond imagination of anyone, so now the international community start talking about it and having conversation when people are now trapped and dying in masses. The recent escalated violence in Al-Fashir, a city, the historical capital of Darfur, a city that housed 2 million people. Those 2 million people, as I speak to you, are trapped. The Rapid Support Forces has blocked aid coming into the city, has blocked fuel, has blocked any goods coming. People are starving to death, and they have nowhere to turn because Al-Fashir has no bordering countries. Like last year, we have witnessed was one of the most horrific acts of ethnic cleansing. People were targeted on ethnic basis. The indigenous Masalit and other African indigenous communities were massacred in broad daylight. We saw that should have shocked the world conscious and prompted the international community to act. Unfortunately, it went into a few words of condemnation, including our government here in the United States. They have done very little to end the crisis. There has been constant talk and conversation about achieving ceasefire. The warring party are not ready to step back to see the plight of the people. And we have constantly advocated for immediately delivery of humanitarian aid because we have seen that in Gaza, in Ukraine, the world did not wait for the war to stop to feed and help people survive. And why Sudan is an exception. And we have been crying, like right as I speak to you, I'm in New York for the UN high-level UN General Assembly. You can imagine how that crazy it is. But for how long I have to do this? The first time I get to the UN, it was in 2007. I've never thought that I will be talking about atrocities in Darfur 20 years later. Unfortunately, it is the same. But women, despite being the victim of the most horrific crimes, back in the early Darfur cases, women were targeted systematically for rape and all forms of sexual violence. Today, in this war, rape and sexual and gender-based violence become a defining feature of this war. Women have demonstrated again an outstanding resilience and courage to rise beyond their circumstances. They have yet to be protected. And every now and then we see the international community discussing women, peace, and security and conflict-related sexual and gender-based violence. So within this context, I think it is because of the failure of the international community that we have to shoulder the effort of being, you have no option when you are from Sudan or from Burma or from Afghanistan, you have no option. This is the only option. You don't have an option to even to feel the trauma. You have to shut off your feeling, and you have no option to get discouraged because there are so many people's life depend on you. Today, our organization is on the ground in Darfur, in Sudan, in hard to reach areas, fighting and trying to help people survive every day, providing safe space for women survivors to receive psychosocial support and trauma counseling. Speaking within the context of the innovation and economic empowerment of women. First, in order to empower women, I think women have the power, but we have to give them the opportunity to exercise that power. You can see, like from the leaders speaking in this call, everyone has gone through the situation, has gone through crisis, but risen beyond their circumstances. What is needed is that a serious accountability measures to be put in place first. Perpetrators must be held accountable, and that participation of women should not be treated as a value added, but it has to be a right. Women have to have a voice in every level of decision making to be able to decide what kind. And then the international community and all those making intervention, they must provide opportunities for women for training, capacity building, access to information, technology, and also innovation, digital financing for women impacted with conflict related, because there's so many limitations. Sometimes women simply can't travel because they don't have credit card. These are all areas that we really need to stress for our advocacy, not only for the international community and policymaker, but also for NGOs making intervention in those countries. So I will stop here and be more than happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Nimat. There's so many things that come up hearing the three of you talk about your experiences and the situations in your home countries. And the thing that keeps rising in my head is remembering from my time in the Security Council, and whenever we were talking about threats to international peace and security, I would sit there and think, why are we turning to men with guns to solve problems created by men with guns? Like, what is wrong with us? Why do we keep doing this? And it just was like, I really, and you guys really encapsulate the paradox of the women, peace, and security agenda, of how the failure to fully implement and embrace that agenda and bring it to the fore has limited us in terms of really addressing the root causes of conflict and providing security in places like Sudan, Burma, and Afghanistan. And I also think that, 5 years ago, when I knew all of you 5 years ago in 2019, I was in touch with all of you 5 years ago, and this would have been a very different panel 5 years ago. All of your countries had problems and challenges, but there was at least a sense of hope that there could be, there were certain positive aspects. Now it's quite dark for all of them. Which leads me to my final question, and then I want to open it up. I hope we'll have some time. But if you can just very briefly talk about, you're all out of your home countries right now, and there's this theme of exile and return among, and I want to ask you how that impacts your current work, and how it affects you as women leaders. And let's start with Nahid again.
Sure, and I'm very much touched by the testimonies and recommendations other speakers highlighted. Thank you so much. It was very useful, and it is applicable in all contexts: Afghanistan, Sudan, Burma, any conflict, because women face the same issues, women face the same problem. Women have been utilized politically, women have been raped, women have been disappeared, arrested because of the conflict between two groups. Women have been used And this is not just isolated context only in Burma or in Sudan. It happened in the history of Afghanistan as well. I'm in exile. I call myself a former member of parliament that desire to return to my country where I can make that country a better place for the next generation, for my daughter. Because as I told you about this intergenerational conflict that I encountered, my mom encountered, my grandma encountered, I don't want my daughter to encounter the same situation. I want her to go back to a country she deserves. Her dignity, her right, her freedom, her liberty is respected. And that's basically the reason I'm here. That's basically the reason I wake up every day, and I think that's the most meaningful thing to do, to give voice to those who are voiceless and are silenced. And I am very much concerned about the education system and situation back in Afghanistan because I myself got the power through education. I didn't have anything else. I just started to study and I insisted, even during the 90s, when I was a teenager and the Taliban took power and I was in prison at home from 1995 to 2001 until 9/11 happened. I studied. That was the only hope. Those books were like windows of hope for me. And these days, I'm working with a number of students in Afghanistan through Pathways program that I established, that they are studying. And when I talk to them, they are saying the same thing, that we are looking to this screen as a window of hope. It's not just a screen that we're learning from. This is how I am getting my daily energy to move forward, not to give up, because I see them, they do not give up and they want to strive, and I feel I'm obliged to support them. But I also remember one of the questions that my professor kept asking me and everyone, the same as the question you were highlighting, Ambassador Currie. And the question was, what is about a girl with a book that frightens a man with a gun? Really, what is it? Let's ask this question from ourselves. Let's see why a girl with a book is that much powerful that men with gun are so frightened from, and they just want to silence women, not to get them the ability to go to school, to university, while they have gun, they have, I mean, the power. They are there, but they know education is key to change and develop and to resist and to start thinking different and to start eradicating violence and conflict. And that's how we have to, I think, replicate our efforts in order to make sure girls get access to education. And the impact of conflict on the intellectual rights of people, and especially women, conflict doesn't take away physical freedom only, it targets
Right.
the intellectual
The mind.
potential of
Yeah.
people, women.
Thank you, Nehajan. And so, Makiso, same question to you.
Thank you. Thank you for asking these questions. It's really resonate well with our community. A lot of us become exile or being in diaspora by chance or by force. So in relation to that, recently I have the privilege to carry out extensive research for University of San Diego on the Myanmar women's peace builders in diaspora in United States case study. So your questions really fits into the recent finding that we have produced, and I would like to share with you. The key findings from this research is that after people left Myanmar, they sometimes came to Thailand, and then they end up in the third country, United States or Norway or Canada. But one of the commonality among these women in diaspora as peace builder is they continue to build peace. They haven't given up their peace building, peacemaking, and human rights defending work, even from afar. But during the time, they faced so many challenges in doing peace building work from the diaspora. They got criticism from their own fellow community left behind. Some of the community left behind, rightfully so, felt they have left, although they have very important reason why they must leave. But the effective community feel you are not there to bear witness, but it is contrary to what effective community or international community may think. The women's peace builder, peacemaker in diaspora, like three of us here, continue to bear witness through the digital platform, continue to be plugged into the effective communities and the emerging women's organizations. We provide support and referral system to different safe houses, not only inside the country, as well as along Thai-Burma border, in Malaysia, and Bangladesh-Burma border, and so on. But women's peace builder in diaspora are constantly trying to navigate this difficult health systems, immigration system, and employment sector in United States. When they settle in United States, some of them are not really in the status of asylee yet. They came with a humanitarian parole, so they are on the humanitarian parole, transitioning to asylum seeking applicant status only. So they are not able to access to a lot of federal program or student loans to continue study for themselves, as well as their family member and children. And health insurance was initially a challenge, but slowly by slowly they have overcome and secure health insurance in the marketplace. So despite all these challenges, it is really incredible that women's peace builder in diasporas are using a wide range of strategies and leveraging opportunities to really bring about peace and conflict resolution back home in Burma. Those who are very skillful in advocacy, many of these women's peace builders are also, Ambassador Currie was very much I know them very well. These women in United States or in Europe, they are constantly providing closed-door briefing to Security Council member state, like-minded member state, calling them out on their lukewarm response to Myanmar humanitarian crisis and the stagnations, and how people are turning into the man with gun to solve the problems instead of providing opportunities and resources to women's peace builder who can actually bring different groups and fragmented groups from different ethnic nationalities and different regions come together to start exploring what had and trying to find rays of lights in times of darkness. And some women's peace builders are very ahead of their game. They are ensuring gender inclusiveness in the security organizations. Myanmar has now a plethora of organizations. Some of them are resistance organization, revolutionary forces. Some of them are not under the auspices of the NUG or any other existing ethnic organization. So very important to provide humanitarian law, international humanitarian law, international human rights law. What Women, Peace and Security agenda is all about how to end impunity and zero tolerance for sexual harassments and conflict-related sexual violence, even to the enemy. This kind of messages are constantly being generated from the women in diaspora, together with women's inside and together with women's group along the border, and providing this messaging, these training to these armed actors are also happening. And there are some women peace builder in diaspora group. They are extremely good at social networking, using digital platform to do the networking as well as fundraising. So it is very encouraging to see that in our global platform for fundraising, 80% of the registered fundraisers are women.
Yep.
And and the last 2 years, they have been able to raise millions of dollars going directly to the affected community, not through an INGO that cuts 7 to 15% for their administrative fees.
Or
So
more.
Yeah. And advocacy and for targeting, UN agency as well as Geneva Human Rights Council are also undertaken by women in diaspora. So when I explore, are you settling in the third country, or are you going back? That is a very emotionally invoking question. Some people said they will get on the next plane as soon as there is stability. Some people will continue to work wherever they are. But, different diaspora has different life journey and they have different vision. But one commonality, as I said earlier, is everyone to bring about change in Myanmar through removal of this military junta from the politics and building federal democracy country that is providing equal footing and opportunity to all ethnic nationality and across genders.
Thank you so much, Mateso. That's, I think, a great segue into Nemat's experience of how this, how the whole community of women contributes to the effort. And so I'm going to ask her to speak, but I know she has to leave a little early, but we are open until 11:30. I just was told by Myra we're going to extend a little bit because we got a late start. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will then feed them to our two panelists that are going to be remaining after our friend Nemat has to jump off.
Great. Thank you again. I think for me as someone in the diaspora, like living the experience and live it in the very beginning, it was a very conflicting feeling because you want to be there and you feel your effort, your expertise, your knowledge and energy is needed where people are so desperately need every inch of help that they can get. But it also, for me, I felt sometimes like, well, what if I'm not here to speak for them when the entire country is being put in hold and hostage? And my organization in the first place, it become like a symbol of hope for many because of the fact that before I leave, I work with so many women who were on the ground doing the same work that I just mentioned earlier, documenting atrocities, helping their people survive, serving as a spokesperson for their communities. But that effort has not been recognized even within our own anti-genocide advocacy groups. And when people speak, people can easily speak about how many people have been killed, how many people have been displaced. In all these numbers, have you seen any number of how many women have been impacted, even though rape has been used as a tool of genocide? And that was confirmed by the International Criminal Court indictment for former President al-Bashir. We don't see those statistics. And that has prompted me to strongly feel when I was leaving, I made the promise to the women who have been fighting behind the scene, but they were not lucky like me to be able to leave, because even leaving the country require, like, you have the permission, you have the support of your family. to flee so that you can be safe and speak for them. But that's not the case for many women coming from like very close conservative community. That was not an option for many women. And so I made a promise that wherever I go, I will create an organization that will not only speak for the women of Darfur, but recognize their leadership, resilience, courage, and support. So that kind of, I felt our being in exile have a purpose, and we are put in this position to be a voice, to provide that light when there's really a situation where it's very hard to find hope. We are trying our best to tell our people that your plight is not being forgotten, and continue to provide that voice also to lead. And there is a lot of challenges come with that, because people expect of you more, like you have to be there educating policymakers, speaking to the international community, and then also your community here. There are so many challenges facing people who are newly arrived as refugees, and particularly women, like all those barriers, language and cultural barriers, lack of access to quality job, quality education. And then, so people expect of you so much, and then you don't have that option to get discouraged. So you have to stand up and get up and do something every day. But what I really like about what we do is that has given hope to many young girls who wanted to be another Nahid, another Nimad, another um, the sister from Burma. So it's kind of the impact that you leave in the society, and the impact that you show that women are capable. And that is something that I think I pride myself, and also feel strongly about many of you, the work that you have been doing, because otherwise someone has to do this. But if you look back and think of, if you didn't do this, what will happen? Because then everyone would be so scared. Like for me, like being a woman from Darfur, from Sudan, standing up and speaking about gender-based violence, speaking about rape, like people was like, why is she always speaking about these issues? I was like, it affects women, and this is not women issues. It is community issues. It's society issues. If a woman impacted, that means a family, the community, the society. So we have to. So it is really something that we live by every day. But you look back and see the impact. But also our organization sometimes also for victim, like people find it hard, like when it comes to support, like, oh, well, we want to support people who are on the ground. It's like you are not considered even though we have operation on the ground and working every day, and then you are not considered a diaspora. Like, so like when you are or not considered an international organization. So like every day, like you meet that everywhere, all those challenges, but you have to overcome those and be able to be present and provide, speak, and do for your people. And today, something that we have been talking about for years, it has been validated of you must empower the affected communities if you want to enact change in those countries, and particularly women. When the international community left, we are a small, tiny organization, but right now we are everywhere. Those international organizations, we really love the work they do, but they're not on the ground right now. So that kind of reinforce what we have been doing, that you need to empower communities and leaders from those communities, because they are on the ground, because they know their issues, they have the expertise. And Myra may remember, like 10, 14, 15 years ago, we will sit and talk about all this. And so it is quite challenging, but also rewarding, I can say. So I would like to thank you and all, and thank my fellow movement leaders for what you do. Keep doing what you are doing, and I'm pleased to have this opportunity to meet you and speak to you. I would like to thank our audience and apologize for not being around to take your questions. Ambassador Currie and Dr. Erickson, it is a pleasure to see you, and I look forward to meeting you again in another opportunity.
So I'm still so bad at this. You would think after all this time I would be better, but I can't figure out how to turn the mute on and off without touching my screen. So all of our panelists today, the words that I keep hearing from you, which is hope, resilience, strength, and fight. And I think that these are the words that come to mind when I think of the women who I have had the pleasure and privilege to work with over the years. I've asked our audience to provide some questions, but so far I don't see any in the chat. So you're going to keep getting my questions instead. Makisa, and we're sorry that Nimad had to leave at 11, but like I said, we'll take a few more minutes. How you talked a little bit about the other word that I've heard from you all is accountability and impunity. And so if you can both talk a little bit about how the situation of mass atrocities in your country, especially mass atrocities directed at women, how you are working both with communities on the ground. You've both talked about documentation and technology, and what are, if there's anything that you haven't talked a little bit about in terms of prevention of mass atrocities, and how women and women's organizations and women leaders in both on the ground and at the international level can help on the prevention side. I would love to hear from you about that. And then we do have a question, which I will also take into this, which we can ask Nahid to talk about life under the Taliban and whether technology has made a difference. These windows of hope that I love that imagery. But I'm going to go to Makiso first, and then let Nahid answer both my question and the question from the audience.
Thank you for these questions. It's very relevant and important. As we know, the Myanmar military junta has enjoyed the impunity for all the atrocities and crimes against humanity that they have carried out against the ethnic nationalities and gender minorities for decades after decades. So women are not only uprooting the military as an institution, they are also uprooting, ending impunity of atrocities, and including conflict-related sexual violence and gender-based violence. And when women's groups talk about impunity, it is not only targeted at this military, the coup council, the junta, also impunity within at the societal and community level. For example, impunity of perpetrator carrying out gender-based violence against a young girl in the community, or somebody who is connected to a political party, be this political party close to the People's Party, the party that people admire. Women's group are calling out on the perpetrator. They want to end impunity at all levels, on all sides, in every community, not only with the armed actors, but also in the lay person and civilians community as well. One of the recent cases was that women's group came together to really call out on one of the individual within the movement who has been found guilty of committing sexual harassment against one of his staff member. So women's group are not shying away from calling out the men from their own community who are committing sexual harassments or sexual exploitation. That is very encouraging. That is really what feminism is all about. It's not about, and what human rights defenders are all about. You are not only defending the human rights of your own community. When there is a mole or a sickness within your community, you have to call them out, and they have done it. And earlier I talked about, in terms of preventions, we have so many units of people defense forces, local defense forces. Some of them are not under the chain of command of the NUG or other ethnic resistance organizations. So by way of preventing atrocity and violence, women's groups are thrilling that the fight has to be for just cause and for liberations and for federal democratic nations, and they cannot violate under no certain terms the human rights, the principles and humanitarian principles, and the right to protect for the civilians during armed conflict. That is one of the preventions works that women groups are doing. Another type is in terms of prevention, they are also fostering social cohesions. Like some of your countries, Burma is also extremely ethnically diverse, over hundreds of ethnic nationalities. So in the middle of the war, it is very important for women's group to bring different fragmented ethnic nationality together to talk about what they imagine and what they envision in the future Myanmar, future Burma, when the coup is reversed and when the military is removed from the politics, and what kind of power sharing between the central body and the federal units. To this end, women groups are making these federal unit local governance gender sensitive, providing gender perspective in this federal unit level, local state level constitution drafting processes.
Wonderful. And Nahid, if you can, answer both my question and the question about the comparison of life under the Taliban previously and under this time, and the role that technology has played in terms of how it's changed things.
Sure, thank you. I see a lot of good question in the chat. The first one, I want to go with the racial question about the similarities and also difference. Then I will go to your question, Ambassador Kelley. So there are similarities between now and 90s of the Taliban rules in Afghanistan. We see the systematic erasure from public life, the same as 90s. Women are largely barred from public space and jobs and education, the same as 90s. The punishment is also the same. Women are getting imprisoned, women are getting even death threats, they are getting beaten, they are getting disappeared. The 90s was the same, but the difference, as you highlight in your question, is that the visibility, the global awareness, that is very different from the 90s. One of the most significant difference that unlike 90s, Afghan women today have access to global platform, they can have social media, they can use technology, they can share their stories, they can organize even protests in social media, and they call for international attentions. They just not just sit silent. 90s, this visibility was not existent. And today, as I already highlighted earlier, the technology is a tool. The virtual education is a tool. Like schools and universities are closed, but technology allows women to access education through virtual platforms. And there are so many initiatives, like the one that I highlighted, the Pathway program that I established. So many others are also there. And these are critical to ensure that women have the opportunity to learn, but there are also impediments like not having access to internet, not having devices, not having the time difference between, for example, US and Afghanistan. So many of those issues are the impediment. But the social media is also a very important factor. Today, Afghan women use this to resist, to connect, to amplify their voice, and Twitter, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, all these platforms are used. And I think this is how we can, at the same time that we can express ourselves, we can document what's going on in Afghanistan. We can keep the track of the level of atrocities and oppression in Afghanistan, and let the world know, the next generation know what we have gone through in order to retake our freedom. To your question, Ms. Ambassador, there are so many ways to hold the Taliban accountable. But so far, since August 2021, we saw only statements. We saw words. I'm so fed up. I'm so frustrated by seeing world leaders saying we are so sorry. We are sorry about the situation that you are suffering, and this is not enough. I mean, words cannot really help women of Afghanistan. We need actions. There are so many mechanisms that can hold the Taliban accountable. The counterterrorism sanction, UN Security Council is up for renewal. It is important for the United Nations to count that into account. UNIMA mandate is important to be utilized. The UN Credential Committee is deciding about whether Taliban can have a seat in the United Nations or not. We have to let them know, no, the Taliban do not represent the reality of Afghanistan and the government of Afghanistan. So all these issues are at the top, this ICJ, International Court of Justice case that represent hope for women of Afghanistan. And we call upon the international community to unite in supporting this case before ICJ. We have so far some Western countries like Australia, as I told you, and Canada and Germany and Netherlands, but no Muslim majority country, no OIC country step forward to say this is not the interpretation of Islam that Taliban are implementing. We really want a Muslim majority country to step forward to say to the Taliban, no, you're not representing real Islam, and you're not representing the cultural relativism of the fact that you are kind of emboldening in your statements. And I think we need that solidarity, not just in words, but in action. By supporting this legal initiative of ICJ for the first time, we can put sanctions, travel ban, asset freeze on the Taliban, and weakening them instead of sending money to them, and they manipulate the word that they are fighting against terrorism. And there is no tool, no system, no mechanism to hold them accountable, which is very scary.
So going to the questions in the chat. Let's see. Sorry, I'm still so bad with those. It's really embarrassing. The questions are about, and I think you've touched on this, Sangeet, about the ICC and the decision of the International Criminal Court in the Rwanda case to recognize rape and sexual violence and as criminal acts under the Rome Statute. And the need to make this a more consistent practice in order to make it a reality by strengthening enforcement and criminalizing broader gender-based violence. And I would add, the kinds of legal and social practices that the Taliban is implementing, the gender apartheid that the Taliban is implementing, as well as in Afghanistan since they've come back into holding power. And then I think of the incredible work that was done by Burmese women's organizations going back decades to the License to Rape report from the Shan Women's Action Network in 2004 that really highlighted the problem of sexual violence in as a weapon of war in Burma, as well as more recent examples that we've seen both post-coup as well as the widespread use of sexual violence in the Rohingya genocide. And one of the things that to me was most remarkable coming out of the during the Rohingya genocide was to see other ethnic women's organizations step forward and say, when people were denying, when Burma and when the military was denying that they were engaging in rape as a weapon, that they were targeting Rohingya women with rape, and the other ethnic women's organizations in Burma coming forward and saying, oh no, we know that this is true because it's happened to us for decades. And so we know that this is a feature, not a bug, of the way this military operates. So the question really is about how can the international community, I guess, do more to strengthen enforcement around these norms, and to start with criminalizing, I think, not just talking about, mass rape, but getting to the I guess gateway drugs of gender-based violence and some of these and the systemic discrimination and sidelining of women that you see in the inherent. What more can we do, and then the other question, and I think these are related, is in ways, and I hope you can answer it both, and we've got 10 minutes, is how these women's movements can expand protection to other gender minorities, and whether that's based. And I know in Burma and in Afghanistan as well, we have seen this happen, that the women's movements have opened space for the recognition of the rights of all historically marginalized groups, and that this has been a constant effort that, by expanding the rights and protections of one group, you create space to expand the rights and protections of others. But I'm going to let you guys answer those things and talk about them instead of me. So yeah, why don't we go to Makeso for that?
Thank you once again for very, very pertinent questions, especially now there is a draft conventions on the preventions and punishments of crimes against humanity, where international legal jurisprudence and feminist legal scholars are trying to bake in this gender apartheid language, as well as the gender-based persecutions in this draft conventions that is in the making. So for both of our countries, this convention process is extremely pertinent. As you correctly pointed out, Ambassador Currie, yes, the Myanmar Burmese military has been using rape as a weapon of war for the longest time. I mean, since the 70s, against the ethnic nationalities, and the women's group on the ground are the one that really came forward and systematically, very technically sound documentation work. And they have been documenting started with the Shan Women's Action Network and other Kachin Women's Network, Karenni Women, and so many ethnic nationality women's group come forward and document to show the same pattern and the same impunity that the Burmese military enjoy. And that is part of their modus operandi. It is not isolated cases that only happen with the Shan ethnic minority. It is part and parcel of their military tactic and strategy, because it is cheaper than buying a weapon for their soldiers to kill. They're trying to dehumanize and terrorize this ethnic community by hurting the women and dehumanizing the women through mass rape and conflict-related sexual violence. So towards this end, many women's groups are putting their hope on the IIMM process. But as we know that these international processes take a long time, and sometimes they stagnate, and According to the latest report, apparently the International Investigation Monitoring Mechanism that is specifically for Burma, created after the UN fact-finding mission. So this IIM, it is the body that going to receive all the case files against egregious human rights cases, human rights violations, women's rights violation, conflict-related sexual violence cases, and they are going to prepare these case files until such time there will be a jurisdiction where they can provide these cases to discharge the legal duty to bring the perpetrator, war criminal to account. So we understand that Argentina has already opened universal jurisdictions on Burma, and we also understand that IIM is going to furnish with some of the pieces of evidence they have to further proceed with this Argentina hearing of the series of violations that is being committed by the Myanmar military junta. And the latest one is Turkey. Turkey also accepted some of the complaint of human rights violation, egregious human rights violation, including conflict-related sexual violence that are happening pre-coup and post-coup, most specifically. And in terms of IIM involvement through the Turkish court system is unclear. And we also understand that many of these human rights group and pro-democracy groups have also approached the UK, the Philippines, and Germany to invoke the international responsibility to protect through the UJ system. So these are the things that women's group are hinging their hope on. That said, we are also very worried about these, how lengthy, expensive these processes are. At the same time, we really recommend the international actor to provide resources for services to run the safe houses. Multilateral, multi-sectoral services are very much needed. Prophylactic HIV medication, a post-rape kits, a forensic collection kit. These are the things that are very important and very needed on the ground as well. So it's good to have these international mechanisms, but women's groups are really hoping that the adequate resources will be allocated towards services and provisions of life-saving support for survivors.
And also, I know that some of the local, places in the liberated areas, they are already moving forward with local action against and preparing cases at the local level, which I think is also really important. We've seen that in Ukraine as well. And so, Nahid John, I think we're going to ask you to carry us home and talk a little bit, but I think we're really close on time. So if we can have 5 more minutes, Myra, for Nahid, and then wrap up, is that good? And thank you all for sticking with us. Go ahead, Nahid.
Sure, I will keep this part very short because Kay really highlighted so many issues that I wanted to touch upon. When Afghanistan fell under the Taliban in 2021, in October 2021, like 3 months after the August, I was asked to go to the U.S. Senate Banking Committee to talk about how U.S. can start a sanction regime against the Taliban. And that time, that was the policy, but that did not take actually any traction further. But I talked about gender apartheid for the first time. That was the first time an Afghan woman talked about gender apartheid after the fall of the country. I believe in 90s, some international scholars talk about that. But that was basically the first time I brought that out. And so many people said, as a lawmaker, as a person who is a student of law, you shouldn't talk about the terms that are not recognized internationally. So gender apartheid is not a legal term. And I told them, no term have been recognized from the origin of human being. All terms have been created through life experiences of the people. So Afghan women are facing gender apartheid. This is a form of institutionalized oppression in which their fundamental human rights are systematically denied. And the Taliban use both state efficiency and use women to stay in power. So these are the elements of apartheid, as we have seen in the history in South Africa, that it was a racial apartheid, and they used the same kind of measures. And now this is not about a racial group, this is about the gender group. And yeah, since that, then so many other interlocutors joined the conversation. And now gender apartheid is part of that crime against humanity draft treaty. Thanks to bringing this up, Ms. Kay, I call upon all audience. You are all important people. Join the campaign to keep gender apartheid as a crime against humanity. And then we can hold the perpetrators of human rights and women's rights accountable for their deeds. I think this is the call for action, and I think this is the homework we take home from our conversation today, that we have a lot to do.
Yes, absolutely. We do have a lot to do. And I think that's the right note to end it on. But I think that's a note of both hope and persistence, which I think characterizes this panel, characterizes the hard work that we are all engaged in. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Myra, can I turn it over to you for some last words?
Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, the audience, you are amazing. Thank you for really great questions. Of course, the speakers, the moderator. Yes, you all. We wouldn't have done this without you. And of course, to the Carter Center for allowing, giving us this platform to share the information, the struggle that people across the world are going through, including the 3 countries that we're focusing on today. And with no further ado, I just wanted to say have a nice weekend and good morning as you head out to your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.